Jasmine Carter stood in the doorway of her corner office, arms crossed, watching Darius Thompson gather his things at exactly 5:25. 4 years she had worked in this building, and 4 years she had watched this man leave at the same time every single day, without fail. Tonight, something in her snapped. "Why won't you date?" The question left her mouth before she could stop it. Darius froze, his hand on the door handle. 4 years, Darius, not once. Everyone talks about it. "What are you hiding?" He turned slowly, and for the first time, Jasmine saw something flicker behind those calm brown eyes. Not anger, not defensiveness, just a weariness so deep it seemed to have no bottom. "You really want to know?" Jasmine nodded, her heart suddenly pounding. She had no idea that his answer would shatter everything she thought she understood about love, about sacrifice, about the promises people make and the ones they actually keep. 6 months earlier, Jasmine Carter had walked into Carter Financial Group as its youngest CFO in company history. The nameplate on her door felt like both an achievement and an accusation. Her father had built this firm from nothing, starting with just a desk in their basement in East Atlanta, and now at 31, she was expected to prove that his retirement was a transition rather than a surrender. The first week, she buried herself in performance reports. Numbers never lied. Numbers never whispered behind your back about nepotism or questioned whether you had earned your seat at the table. That was when she first noticed Darius Thompson. His file was remarkable in its consistency. 4 years of flawless performance reviews, not a single error in his quarterly reports, client satisfaction ratings that consistently ranked in the top 3% of the entire company. Yet he had declined every promotion offered to him. 3 times he had been recommended for team lead. 3 times he had politely refused. Jasmine called him into her office on a Tuesday afternoon. He arrived exactly on time and sat across from her with the patient stillness of a man who had learned to wait. "Mr. Thompson, I've been reviewing your file." She kept her voice professionally neutral. "You're one of our strongest performers. Why have you turned down every leadership opportunity?" Darius met her eyes without flinching. "I prefer to leave at 5:30. The team lead position requires more hours." Jasmine leaned forward, genuinely puzzled. In her world, ambition was oxygen. Everyone wanted to climb. Most people would kill for these opportunities. "Why don't you want to advance?" "Not everyone, Miss Carter." His voice was calm, almost gentle. "Some of us have already found what we're climbing toward." She had dismissed him then, frustrated by his cryptic answer. But his words lingered in her mind like a splinter she could not quite remove. What Darius Thompson climbed toward became clear at 5:32 that same evening. He pulled out of the parking garage and merged onto the expressway. His route so familiar, he could have driven it blindfolded. 20 minutes later, he turned into the tree-lined entrance of Riverside Haven Long-Term Care Facility. The nurses at the front desk nodded as he passed. They had stopped asking him to sign in years ago. Room 217 was at the end of the east corridor, where the afternoon light lasted longest. Keisha lay exactly as she had for 4 years, her chest rising and falling with the steady rhythm of the ventilator. Her braids had grown longer since the accident, and Darius had learned to maintain them himself, the way she used to like them. He pulled the chair close to her bed and took her hand. "Hey, sweetheart. Long day today. We got a new CFO, the old man's daughter. She asked me why I don't want to be a manager." He laughed softly. "I didn't know how to explain that I already have the most important job in the world." He read to her for an hour, the same book they had started before the accident, a romance novel she had picked up at the airport bookstore, the pages now soft from handling. He never skipped ahead. They would finish it together, even if together looked different now than either of them had imagined. At 7 o'clock, he drove to Maya's after-school program. His daughter burst through the doors with the boundless energy of an 8-year-old who had been sitting still too long. "Daddy, Mr. Jackson told the funniest joke today about a penguin and a snowman. Did you tell Mom? Darius buckled her seatbelt and kissed the top of her head. I did. She would have laughed. They cooked dinner together that night, jollof rice with too much pepper, the way Keisha used to make it. Maya set 3 places at the table, including the empty chair they never removed. After homework and bath time and one more chapter of Charlotte's Web, Darius tucked his daughter into bed. He sat alone in the dark kitchen until nearly midnight, staring at the wedding photo on the refrigerator. In it, Keisha was laughing at something he had whispered in her ear, her veil caught in the wind. Both of them so young they barely looked like adults. He did not cry. He had stopped crying after the first year, when he realized that tears changed nothing and energy was better spent on the living. But he allowed himself these quiet moments of remembering, of honoring what had been, of waiting for what might still come. Some promises, he had learned, did not have expiration dates. A month passed, and Jasmine found herself paying closer attention to Darius Thompson than she wanted to admit. She noticed that he ate lunch alone at his desk, never joining the groups that gathered in the break room. She noticed that he deflected personal questions with practiced ease. She noticed that his desk held no photographs, nothing that would hint at who he became after 5:30 each evening. The first real crack in his armor appeared on a Thursday afternoon. Jasmine was walking to her car when she spotted Darius in the parking lot, phone pressed to his ear. She slowed her pace. I'll be there in 20. His voice was different than she had ever heard it. Soft, worried, tender. How was she today? A pause. Then did she seem comfortable? Good. Tell her I'm on my way. He ended the call and drove away without noticing Jasmine standing 3 rows over, her car keys forgotten in her hand. The next morning, she did something she was not entirely proud of. She asked Shanice in HR to pull Darius Thompson's emergency contact information. There was only one number listed: Riverside Haven Long-Term Care Facility. Jasmine spent her lunch hour researching the facility. Riverside Haven specialized in patients with severe brain injuries, comas, and persistent vegetative states. They provided round-the-clock care for people who could not care for themselves, people whose families had not given up hope. Her hands trembled slightly as she closed the browser. Darius Thompson had someone at that facility, someone he visited every single day. That Friday, the company held its monthly happy hour at a lounge downtown near Piedmont Park. Jasmine attended because she was expected to. Darius, of course, was not there. $5 says he's got a secret girlfriend, Shanice announced to a group gathered by the pool table. No man that fine stays single for 4 years without a reason. Or maybe he's just weird, someone else offered. You ever notice he never talks about his life? It's like he doesn't exist outside this office. Jasmine said nothing. She knew more than they did now, but the knowledge sat heavy in her chest. That weekend, Darius and Maya made their regular visit to Riverside Haven. Maya had spent all of Saturday morning on a new drawing. It's us at the park, she explained, holding up the finished picture. See, there's you and there's me and there's Mommy. She's wearing her yellow sundress, the one she wore on my birthday before. Darius studied the drawing with the seriousness it deserved. In the picture, all 3 of them were standing. All 3 of them were smiling. It's beautiful, sweetheart. Let's go show her. They taped the picture to the wall beside Keisha's bed, next to dozens of others that Maya had made over the years. A gallery of hope rendered in crayon and colored pencil. Do you think she sees them? Maya asked, her small hand wrapped around her mother's unmoving fingers. Darius knelt beside his daughter. I think she feels them, and that's enough. The annual charity gala was the most important event on Carter Financial Group's social calendar. Jasmine needed Darius there. He was the only analyst who understood the intricacies of their investment portfolios well enough to answer the technical questions that wealthy clients inevitably asked. She summoned him to her office. The Henderson Foundation Gala is next Saturday evening. I need you there. Darius's expression did not change, but something in his posture shifted. I have commitments. Reschedule them. I can't. Jasmine felt her frustration rising. Mr. Thompson, this is not optional. Then I apologize, but I won't be able to attend. They stared at each other across her desk, neither willing to yield. Finally, Jasmine asked a question she had never thought to ask before. Every evening you have commitments, every single evening. Something passed across Darius's face. Surprise, perhaps? Or the faint recognition of being truly seen? Yes, Miss Carter. Every single one. Jasmine leaned back in her chair, studying him. The analyst who never networked. The man who left at 5:30 every day without fail because someone somewhere was waiting for him. What if I moved the gala to Saturday afternoon? She heard herself say. Would that work? Darius blinked. In 4 years at this company, no one had ever adjusted a schedule to accommodate him. You would do that? I need you there, and you have somewhere to be in the evenings. This seems like a reasonable compromise. I'll move the start time to 2 o'clock, but I need you there until at least 4:45. Darius considered for a long moment. 4:45. No later. Done. The gala was a success by every measurable standard. Darius arrived in a dark suit that made him look like a different person entirely. Confident and commanding in a way that his usual office demeanor only hinted at. He charmed the clients, answered every technical question with ease, and conducted himself with a quiet authority that Jasmine found herself watching whenever she thought he was not looking. At 4:43, he approached her near the dessert table. Miss Carter, thank you for the accommodation. I need to leave now. She nodded, surprised by the small pang of disappointment she felt. Of course. You've done more than enough. He was gone before the clock struck 4:45. A silver-haired investor sidled up to Jasmine. Your best guy just left. Everything all right? Jasmine watched the door where Darius had disappeared. He has somewhere more important to be. The words surprised her. She had never said anything like that about an employee before. Jasmine began to notice things she had been too busy to see before. She noticed that Darius always took the stairs instead of the elevator. She noticed that he kept a small silver watch in his desk drawer, one he sometimes held but never wore. She noticed that on the rare occasions when he smiled, the expression transformed his entire face. The answer came in pieces over the following weeks. Piece 1 arrived when Darius called in sick without warning on a Thursday morning. When he returned, a coworker asked if he had enjoyed his day off. My daughter was sick, Darius said simply. She's better now. Daughter. He had a daughter. Jasmine pulled his file again. Emergency contact number 2 was indeed a child, Maya Thompson, age 8. There was no mother listed anywhere. Piece 2 came later that same week. Darius had left his desk briefly, and Jasmine found herself walking past it, her eyes drawn to the silver watch. She could see now that it was a woman's watch, delicate and old-fashioned, a wife's watch. Piece 3 arrived one evening when Jasmine stayed late. At 6 o'clock, she noticed Darius's car still in the parking lot. This was unusual. He was always gone by 5:35 at the latest. She walked down to the lot. His car was parked in its usual spot, and through the windshield, she could see him sitting motionless in the driver's seat, his head resting on the steering wheel. Not sleeping, just still, just tired, just holding himself together in the only private space available to him. Jasmine raised her hand to knock on the window, then stopped. This was not hers to intrude upon. She walked back to the building without making a sound. Meanwhile, at Riverside Haven, Darius read Keisha the next chapter of their book. Maya had recovered from her fever and insisted on coming along. Mommy, I got better, Maya reported. Daddy took care of me, just like you would have. He made soup and everything, even though he put too much salt in it. I did not, Darius protested. You totally did, but I ate it anyway because you tried hard. Darius looked at his wife's peaceful face, then at his daughter's animated one, the two people he loved most in the world. "Your mother," he said quietly, "would be very proud of how brave you were." Maya beamed. "I know. I told her already." Riverside Haven Long-Term Care Facility was not on Jasmine's calendar. The visit was officially about the company's annual charitable donations. But as she walked through the front doors with the facility director, Jasmine knew that she was really here because of the man who visited room 217 every evening. The tour was comprehensive. They saw the physical therapy wing, the family support center, the memorial garden. "Our residents are here because someone refused to give up on them," the director explained. "Every person in this building has at least one person who believes they're worth fighting for." They turned down the east corridor, and Jasmine's heart began to pound. Through the window of room 217, she could see Darius Thompson sitting beside a hospital bed. A woman lay motionless beneath the covers, her chest rising and falling with mechanical regularity. Darius was reading aloud from a book, his free hand wrapped around the woman's fingers. Jasmine stopped walking. She could not move, could not breathe. "That's one of our longest residents," the director said. "Traumatic brain injury from a car accident about 4 years ago. Her husband comes every day without fail, rain or shine, weekday or weekend. He reads to her, talks to her, maintains her braids." Husband. The word hit Jasmine like a physical blow. Not a mother, not a sister, his wife. "Some of our families struggle to visit once a month," the director continued. "But that man, he's never missed a day, not one day in 4 years." Jasmine watched as Darius turned a page, completely unaware of her presence. His face was soft in a way she had never seen at the office, stripped of all the professional armor he wore between 9 and 5:30. This was the man he really was. This was where he went. He was not cold or antisocial or lacking ambition. He was in love. Still. After everything. Jasmine walked out of the building without completing the tour. She sat in her car in the parking lot and cried for the first time in years. Huge gasping sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than her chest. She was 31 years old. She had never loved anyone the way Darius Thompson loved the woman in that hospital bed. She had never even come close. She had chosen career over connection at every crossroads, telling herself that love could wait. But Darius had sacrificed success for love. He had chosen presence over promotion, devotion over advancement, promises over ambition. And sitting in that parking lot, Jasmine realized that she had been measuring her own worth by the wrong scale entirely. She returned to work the next day and said nothing. She treated Darius exactly as she always had, professional and courteous. Though now she ended their meetings 5 minutes early without being asked. Now she never scheduled anything that might make him late. Now she understood what 5:30 meant. It meant, "I love you." It meant, "I'm coming." It meant, "I'll never stop." The Morrison acquisition required long hours and careful analysis, which meant Darius and Jasmine found themselves working together more closely than ever before. She made sure they finished by 5:15 every day. He noticed. "You don't have to accommodate me," he said one afternoon. "I know it creates extra work for you." Jasmine looked up from her laptop. "Everyone has their priorities, Mr. Thompson. I'm learning to respect that." Something shifted between them after that. The conversations grew longer, moving beyond spreadsheets into territory that felt almost personal. Jasmine told him about the pressure of following in her father's footsteps, about the loneliness of being the boss's daughter in a company full of people who saw her name before they saw her work. Darius listened without judgment, without trying to fix anything. He simply understood. "Do you ever feel like you're running towards something no one else sees?" she asked one evening. Darius was quiet for a moment. Every day. The almost moment came on a Wednesday when Maya's after-school program closed unexpectedly. Darius had no choice but to bring her to the office. Jasmine discovered them in the break room, Darius heating up chicken nuggets while Maya colored at the table. "Miss Carter, this is my daughter Maya." Maya looked up with curious eyes. "You're pretty. Daddy didn't say you were pretty." Darius's ears turned red. "Maya, what?" "It's true." Jasmine found herself smiling. "Thank you, Maya. What are you coloring?" "A picture for my mom." Maya held up the drawing, a crayon rendering of 3 figures standing in front of a house. "We're going to put it on her wall with all the others." Jasmine glanced at Darius, saw the shadow that crossed his face, and understood more than Maya intended to reveal. "It's beautiful. Your mother is lucky to have such a talented artist." Later, when Darius stepped out to retrieve Maya's jacket, Jasmine found herself alone with the little girl. "Your dad is a good man," she said. "You're lucky to have him." Maya looked up, suddenly serious in the way that children sometimes become when they are about to say something important. "He's the best, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." But Darius returned before Jasmine could ask what hard meant. "Are you my dad's friend?" Maya asked as they were leaving. Jasmine paused. "I think so." Maya nodded solemnly. "Good. He needs friends. He doesn't let people in." The words stayed with Jasmine long after the Thompsons had gone home. Now they stood in her office at 7 o'clock in the evening, 6 months of history hanging between them, and Jasmine had finally asked the question that had been burning in her chest since the day she saw him through that hospital window. "Why won't you date?" Darius did not sit down. He stood near the door, his hand still resting on the handle, ready to leave at any moment, but he did not leave. "You really want to know?" "Yes." He was quiet for so long that Jasmine thought he might not answer. Then he began to speak, and his voice carried a weight that made the air feel heavier. "My wife, Keisha. 4 years ago, a drunk driver ran a red light and hit her car. She was on her way home from her sister's baby shower, 43 minutes away from our front door." He paused. "She survived. Technically. But she never woke up." Jasmine felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. "The doctors told me she would never recover," Darius continued. "Persistent vegetative state. They recommended removing life support. Letting her go, they called it. Like she was a balloon I could simply choose to release." He looked at Jasmine then, and she saw the 4 years of accumulated grief shimmering behind his calm facade. Her parents agreed with the doctors. They held a memorial service. They mourned her and moved on. A bitter smile crossed his face. "But I couldn't, because she's still here. She's still breathing. Her heart is still beating. And I made her a promise." "What promise? In sickness and in health?" "For better or for worse, until death do us part." Darius spoke the words like a prayer. "She hasn't died, Jasmine. She's just waiting. And I won't abandon her while she waits." "Why didn't you let her go?" she whispered. "Everyone else did." Darius's voice softened. "Because she would have waited for me. If our situations were reversed, Keisha would have been there every day, reading to me, refusing to give up. That's who she was. That's who she still is, somewhere inside." He paused. "And Maya needs to know her mother is still here, even if she can't hug her back. Some promises don't have expiration dates." Jasmine felt tears burning behind her eyes. "Do you still love her?" "Every day." The words came without hesitation. "More than the day I married her." "Is that why you don't date?" Darius finally met her gaze directly, and Jasmine saw something there that made her breath catch. "You asked why I don't date? That's why. To me, it would be cheating. Not legally, not technically, but to the vows I made, it would be a betrayal. And I won't do that to her, not while she's still breathing." The words hung in the air between them. Jasmine thought about herself at 31, unmarried, having never loved anyone enough to wait for them through anything. And here was Darius Thompson, who had built his entire life around a promise to a woman who could not even open her eyes to see him keeping it. "I'm sorry," she said, and her voice cracked. For every time I thought you were cold. For every time I judged you for leaving early. For every time I assumed you just didn't care. You didn't know. His voice was gentle, without accusation. No one does. I prefer it that way. He opened the door, then paused. Thank you for asking, Jasmine. Most people just assume. You're the first person in 4 years who actually wanted to know the truth. He stepped into the darkened hallway, and just before the door closed behind him, Jasmine heard him add, "It means more than you know." Jasmine did not sleep that night. She lay in her expensive bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying Darius's words. Some promises don't have expiration dates. She thought about the woman lying in room 217 and the man who visited her every single day, and the little girl who drew pictures for a mother who might never see them. 31 years old, CFO of a successful company, and she had never loved anyone the way Darius Thompson loved his wife. The next morning, she arrived at the office early, but Darius was already at his desk, and he greeted her with the same professional nod he always gave. Nothing had changed, and everything had changed. Jasmine stopped pushing him to network. She stopped hinting about promotions. Instead, she began to protect his 5:30 departures, defending them to board members who questioned why their best analyst never attended evening events. He has responsibilities, she told them, more important ones than cocktail parties. She made another decision that she told no one about. She called Riverside Haven and asked to speak with the director. She explained that Carter Financial Group wanted to make an anonymous donation to the long-term care fund, specifically to cover the costs for a patient named Keisha Thompson. How much? The director asked. Enough to cover her care for the next 5 years, whatever that number is. The director was silent for a moment. That's very generous. May I ask why this patient specifically? Jasmine thought about Darius sitting in his car in the parking lot, finding the strength to face another day. Because some promises deserve to be supported, she said, even the ones we don't make ourselves. The following weekend, Darius and Maya made their usual visit to Keisha's room. Maya had created a new drawing. This one's different, Daddy. Look. Darius examined the picture. 3 figures stood in the foreground, Maya and Keisha and himself. But in the background, slightly apart from the family group, stood a 4th figure, a woman with long locks, watching them with a small smile. Who's that? Darius asked. The nice lady at your work, the one who asked about you. Maya studied her own drawing critically. She looks lonely, don't you think? Like she's looking for her people but hasn't found them yet. Darius stared at the crayon figure, Jasmine Carter, rendered in a child's simple strokes, standing at the edge of his family portrait. Did you tell her about Mommy? Maya asked. Yes. Good. Maya nodded. She seemed like someone who would understand. That Monday, Darius did something he had not done in 4 years. When his team announced they were going to lunch together, instead of declining as he always did, he hesitated. I can stay for 30 minutes, he said. His co-workers stared at him as if he had announced he was moving to Mars. You're coming to lunch? Shanice from HR asked. Willingly? 30 minutes, Darius repeated. That's all I can spare. From across the room, Jasmine watched him leave with the group, something warm spreading through her chest. The walls he had built were not coming down, but he was opening a door, just a crack. She smiled, and when Darius glanced back over his shoulder before stepping into the elevator, she thought she saw him smile too. 3 months later, Jasmine received a phone call that changed everything. It was the director of Riverside Haven. At the end of the call, she mentioned something. You might be interested to know about one of our long-term patients, Keisha Thompson. She showed signs of responsiveness last week for the first time since her admission. Jasmine's heart stopped. What kind of signs? Her husband was reading to her, and she squeezed his hand. Not a reflex. A purposeful squeeze. Her doctors are cautiously optimistic. Jasmine thanked her and hung up the phone. She sat very still, thinking about Darius reading to his wife day after day, year after year, waiting for exactly this kind of miracle. The evening after Keisha squeezed Darius's hand, the Thompson family gathered in room 217 for the first time as a family that might have a future. Maya sat on one side of the bed, her small fingers wrapped around her mother's hand. Darius sat on the other, reading from a familiar book. His voice was steady, but his free hand trembled slightly. And they lived, he read, not happily ever after, because that's not how real life works. But they lived together, and that was enough. He closed the book and looked at his wife's peaceful face. Her eyelids fluttered, just barely, and her fingers twitched against his palm. "Take your time," he whispered. "I'm not going anywhere. I never went anywhere. I'll be here when you're ready." Maya climbed onto the bed and curled up against her mother's side. "We'll wait, Mommy, however long it takes. That's what Daddy always says. Some promises don't have expiration dates." Outside the room, unseen by the family within, Jasmine Carter stood watching through the window. She held a small bouquet of flowers. She did not go in. She placed the flowers on the nurse's station desk with a note that said simply, "For Keisha Thompson, room 217. And she stood for a moment longer, watching the man who had taught her what love looked like when it was not convenient, not easy, not returned in any of the ways the world usually measured. Darius looked up suddenly, as if sensing her presence. Through the glass, their eyes met. Jasmine raised her hand in a small wave, then turned and walked away down the corridor. She did not look back. She did not need to. Some things were not meant to be spoken. Some connections existed in the spaces between words. Darius watched her go, his hand still wrapped around his wife's fingers. He did not follow her. She did not expect him to. But as Jasmine pushed through the front doors of Riverside Haven and stepped into the cool evening air, she found herself smiling. She had come here looking for something she could not name, a reason to believe that love was real, evidence that people still made promises they intended to keep. She had found it in a hospital room where a man read stories to a woman who might never wake up. She had found it in a little girl's crayon drawings and a silver watch in a desk drawer, and 5:30 departures that were sacred appointments with devotion itself. She had found it, and now she knew it was possible. Darius Thompson might never be hers. Keisha might wake up tomorrow or might sleep forever. The future was uncertain. But Jasmine was 31 years old, and for the first time in her life, she understood what she was looking for. Not success, not power, not a corner office with her name on the door. Just someone who would visit her every day, no matter what. Someone who would read to her and wait for her and refuse to give up. Someone who understood that some promises did not have expiration dates. She walked to her car and drove home through the darkening streets of Atlanta. And somewhere across town, Darius Thompson was reading another chapter to his wife, and a little girl was drawing another picture for the gallery on the wall. And in room 217 at Riverside Haven Long-Term Care Facility, Keisha Thompson's fingers twitched against the hand of the man who had never stopped believing she would come back to him. Sometimes that was enough. Sometimes being seen was the greatest gift of all.